Hey, my friend, you probably already know, strong teams don't happen by accident. They're built when us as leaders actually invest in our people, when we grow in our own self-awareness, and we're intentional in shaping a healthy team culture. Hi, I'm Passionate and I'm Robin Kent, and welcome to Teamwork Made Easier. This podcast, we're going to explore about how to develop your team, how to grow yourself as a leader, and create those cultures where people can thrive together. We'll explore how people are wired and how to leverage our strengths, navigate those frustrations, and build that trust so teams can collaborate more effectively. Because one thing I know, when people are understood and supported, they don't just perform better, they start to love what they do and who they work with. So, my friend, go grab your cup of coffee, settle in, and let's go make teamwork easier, starting today. Hey, my friend, welcome back to Teamwork Made Easier. I am excited to be here with you today. And today we're going to talk about emotional intelligence. This is one of those things that I have seen the impact that it's made in individuals, young, old, and all ages, for a couple of decades now. And so emotional intelligence is something that really impacts us, how we see ourselves, how we understand ourselves, but then also how do we understand others around us? And even though we focus a lot here on the podcast about in our work world, in the workplace, and the people who we work with, but what we're talking about today can really impact any team you're on, whether it's you and your spouse or you and your kids. It just can really, really impact you in that area as well. So let me give you a little bit of background. The difference between IQ and EQ, because emotional intelligence is also known as EQ. And so IQ, when we think about someone's IQ, that is their cognitive ability to learn. All right. So these are typically your IQ cannot really change after the age of 15. All right. It's kind of gets to a point that it doesn't mean you can't learn new things. Absolutely not. But it's just your ability to learn, the IQ stays where it is. And, I don't know how much you know about IQ, but with IQ, I can kind of nerd out on all of this stuff. So bear with me, but I just have to give you a little bit of background because I feel like it will suit you and help you moving forward. But like standard IQ is around 100. All right. So 100 to 115 is like your average, I guess you could say, IQ. And so then when you go higher and higher, there's different, realms. That's just a higher cognitive ability to learn. But again, remember what I said is that it doesn't mean you're not going to learn new things. All right. The cool thing about emotional intelligence is you can always, no matter your age, you can always increase your emotional intelligence. You can always increase that. And so the very, very cool thing is that you can see how different ways, and again, something else we're going to talk about throughout this podcast is ways to improve your emotional intelligence. But today, what I really want to focus on is what is it and what are some ways that it actually impacts us. So emotional intelligence, there's 4 different categories that it has been, focused on. It was not until I believe it was the mid 90s, early 90s, I believe it was 1990-ish, somewhere around there is when it really got labeled and people started really taking a look at this and investigating this. So I don't know. I'm telling my age, but this is me finishing high school. Okay. Is when this really started coming about. When I started really digging into it was actually around 1999, right into the 2000s, because I'll tell you why more in just a second, but I had my first son in 1997. And so shortly after he was born is what I started digging into it. So maybe it was more closer to 2001, 2002, because he was about 3 or 4. I'll tell you that story in a bit. But, so hang on. But with emotional intelligence, there's 4 different categories. So the very first category is self-awareness. This is where you become more aware of your emotions. You become aware of, labeling what you're feeling and understanding that you might get, frustrated, or you might have anxiety. Being able to label those things and understand what is going on inside you. Then the second is self-management. So you have to understand first, you first have to have self-awareness of what it is. But then the second part is self-management. So these are the times like, okay, I know I get angry, but now I have to manage myself when I get angry. Or I know that I might get sad and depressed, but now I have to manage myself when those things happen. I used to tell my students in the school system all the time, I was like, it is not a bad thing. You're not in trouble because you became angry. You got in trouble because of what you did when you became angry. So no matter we're a kid or a grown up, it's what we do. So it's in that self-management stage that's where our consequences come. Whether it's a good consequence or a bad consequence, it's based on how we're managing those emotions. All right. So then a third area is actual social awareness. So this is when we start looking at people outside of us, whether this is your family, whether are your coworkers, whether it's the person at the grocery store. But social awareness, you're aware of people around you, of what their emotions are, of being able to understand, oh, that person looks upset. Oh, that person is really excited. She is just so excited about what's going on. Or that person looks really stressed. Again, this could be your spouse, this could be your kids, this could be your boss, it could be your coworkers, but it's that social awareness of, sometimes you may have heard of it as reading the room. You can read the room, you can read the people. Some people are very expressive and they can't hold the emotions in, and you see it all over their face. And there are some people, you see nothing on their face, but they do have feelings within. So you just have to be aware of what is going on around you. And then the fourth category is taking that social awareness and going into relationship management. So you being able to manage whatever relationship you have with that other person outside of you, of being aware of their feelings and being able to manage how you interact with that type of whatever emotion that is going on. So do you see why it's possible that you can grow in your emotional intelligence? Because you can grow in understanding yourself better. You can grow in managing yourself better. You can grow in understanding people around you better, the people on your team, the people you're leading, your boss. You can learn that, and you can learn how to manage that relationship, whatever kind of relationship it is. So working on your emotional intelligence is key to one, you loving what you do and who you work with, but then the others wanting to be part of your team and you getting the best out of individuals is when you're able to manage these four different kind of categories. Be aware, but then also manage. There are different emotional intelligence tests out there that you can take, and then you can score in those four different categories so that you can see where you fall in, where you're struggling at, and then where you can grow from, because there's so many different ways that you can grow. And again, we'll be talking about that here on the podcast of ways that you can do that. Because of course, the first thing is you have to be aware, right? And then you find ways to, so it depends on where you need to start. If you need to start in understanding your emotions or in managing those emotions. But with emotional intelligence, you are just able to understand even more when maybe you need to stop and take a deep breath. You can understand more of what your limit is and saying, when someone frustrates you or someone sets you off, then you can learn to manage it and say, hey, you know what? I need a break just a minute. Let me come back and think about that, and let me come back to you. You can learn different coping skills, different ways to manage that so that you stay productive and you make sure that you are thinking through what you need to be doing and how to actually manage that, but then also how to develop the people around you to help them go through that. And I am not here saying that you need to go be someone's therapist. By no means, okay? No means at all. My point with this here is that for you to help understand, first of all, yourself, all right, and then understand those around you. What I love doing with the teams and departments and the businesses that I work with is that typically you're going to hire someone like me to come in and do team development and to grow people and to help do personal growth, professional growth, and do those kinds of things. But this is to give you nuggets and give you things of like, oh, this is what my team needs. Or, oh, as a leader, this is where I can have some personal growth so that I can be a better leader to the individuals on my team. All right. So I just want to clarify that for you. So as we get ready to wrap up here and close, I told you I was going to tell you the story of why I even got into emotional intelligence decades ago. So my son that is now 28, I feel so old, but when he was 3 or 4 years old, he was actually determined that he had a very high IQ. He had a IQ surpassed mine, I think surpassed my husband's, or pretty close. And so he got into a special preschool because of his IQ. All right. And so I knew that I probably, wasn't going to have to do spelling tests with him. I wasn't going to have to do multiplication facts with him, all those kind of different things. But what I started to learn as I dug into that is that even though people would come to me and they would say, oh, Robin, you were so lucky to have such a smart kid. And as I was digging into emotional intelligence, my eyes started to open and understand that a lot of times kiddos and people who have the higher IQ, they struggle in the emotional side of things, of how to do that. There's new research that says there's not quite the same correlation there, but sometimes this is the case. And so as a new parent and, this whole new ballpark of area of things, I really dug into that, and it did help too that I was as a school counselor at this time. And so I was really digging into working with students and faculty and different things in that area as well. But it really helped me set him up for more of a success at a younger age of identifying those emotions and identifying how to manage it and how to understand other people. And that, to get along with other people and those kinds of different things, because we weren't going to have to worry about his book smarts. We just wanted to make sure that he used the book smarts in the right way. And on another episode, I'll give you my story about my background and things of why I do what I do, even in a deeper situation. But with him, and it's so funny. So he is definitely someone who is great at 28 with people and interacting. He calls himself an introvert, but if you see him, you would definitely think, are you sure about that? You might be an extrovert. But one of the things he told me a few years ago, he was working at a retail store, and he had a customer who came in and was yelling at him and did not like what was going on, did not like the policies of the store. And the guy was just yelling. Now, let me paint you a little visual real quick, is that my son is 6'5", medium built, but 6'5", so super tall, I think, good looking kid, of course. But so he is, this guy is yelling at him at the retail store. And I said, how did you handle that? And he says, well, Mom, he says, he was yelling. I just lowered my voice and I said, Sir, I totally understand that policy is not something I agree with either, but this is something that we have to follow. And he just lowered his voice. He didn't match and scream back at him. I said, oh my goodness gracious. I said, what happened when you did that? And he says, he lowered his voice. And he was like, oh man, thanks for listening. Thank you for understanding. I know this is crazy. Why do we have to do this? But it brought that guy's tone down, and they were able to have a conversation. So changes up. First of all, he was able to read the room. He was able to read that person in front of him. And then he was able to manage that situation so that tone would come down and we didn't become having a yelling match. Of course, I was so excited and so proud of him. I said, what came to mind? Like, why did you remember to do all of that? He says, well, Mom, you've always told me it's not what you say, but it's how you say it. So, of course, I was like, oh my gosh, he was listening all those years. But that's the difference that emotional intelligence can happen and have, again, with your spouse, with your kids, or in your workplace. You can change when you're able to be aware of the situation around you and figure out how to manage that. Then you're able to switch up the dynamics there and have such a better outcome. So, all right. Well, I hope you found this super helpful, and we will, of course, dig more into EQ and emotional intelligence in future episodes. But I'm excited you're here with me. I'm excited to be on this journey with you to develop your team and your members and yourself so that you love what you do and you love who you work with. All right, my friend, have a great one, and I will talk to you next time. Hey, my friend, thanks so much for spending this time with me on Teamwork Made Easier. My hope is that today's conversation helped you see yourself, your team, or your leadership just a little more clearly. If you want to take this a step further, I'd love for you to grab my How You Are Wired to Work productivity tool. It's a simple, practical way to understand how you naturally work best, what gives you energy, and what might be quietly draining you, so you can work with more clarity, less frustration, and a whole lot more ease. Go to robinkent.com/tool. That's robinkent.com/tool. You can find the link down in the show notes, because when you understand how you're wired and how the people around you are wired, it changes the way you lead, the way you collaborate, and the way your team shows up. All right. Thanks again for being here. If this episode was helpful, share it with a friend or another leader who could use it. And be sure to join me next time as we keep building teams where people love what they do and who they work with.